Delighted to have you all here today in our continuing Washington Leadership Series, which is a series of roundtable discussions that we do through the generosity of Liz Dubin and Michelle Smith, where we bring in leading figures in the community to talk about their contributions, their thoughts. This is something that we're very excited to do because much of what we do has significance on a global stage, national significance, but Washington, despite Aspen being in our name, and of course Aspen being where we have a campus, Washington is our home. So we really relish these opportunities to celebrate pivotal figures contributing to the vitality of our community. Today, we I think couldn't find anyone who is more recognized and a more vibrant figure on the local scene, whose contributions range far beyond just the worlds of sports and business to countless charities and community involvements. Ted Leonsis, of course, the owner of Monumental Sports and Entertainment, owner of three leading sports franchises, of course the Verizon Center, someone who has continued with his extraordinary entrepreneurial successes from his pre-AOL through AOL days, moving on to film and documentaries and countless other areas. And so I know we're going to have an incredibly enlightening conversation with Ted. And to lead that conversation, I'm very pleased to welcome to Aspen Tom Farrey, who's one of the most thoughtful and influential journalists in the world of sports journalism. He brings an extraordinary degree of intelligence and to sports coverage. I'm sure you're familiar with him through ESPN and both television and print. He's also an author of distinction. He has won 2 Emmy Awards for his outstanding sports contributions. And finally and briefly, he's someone who is about to join the Aspen family. We are soon to launch a new program here called the Aspen Program in Sports and Society, where we are going to bring what we do in all of our Aspen endeavors, influential people from the world of sports, broadly defined, together to talk about ways in which sports can play an even more important public contribution to society, looking at issues like youth and fitness and why aren't more playgrounds being built and why is physical education disappearing from some of our schools, and asking some of the important questions about sports and values. So Tom is going to become a familiar part of the Aspen Institute and launching what we think will be a very influential program with national significance. With all of that, I'm just going to turn things over to Tom and to Ted, and after their conversation, look forward to all of you jumping in as well. Tom?
Great. Well, welcome, Ted.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, it's I've covered sports for 25 years, and one of the things I've learned is that well, there are 3 kinds of people that Americans typically don't like. They're lawyers, journalists, and pro sports owners. You're among the most liked, admired sports owners in the business. How'd you do it?
You should read my email, and maybe you'd have a second thought to that. Well, I do think in major urban centers, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, DC, LA, Chicago, that sports teams play a pivotal role in the identity and the psyche of the city and the communities that they serve. And there's not a lot of iconic brands or institutions. When you close your eyes, most of these cities have a university or 2 at the core of defining the community. You know, I'm a graduate of Georgetown. I'm on the board of Georgetown, 1789. You see T-shirts that are sold. They show the Healy Hall clock tower right next to the Washington Monument. And so, you know, you think of Boston, you think of Harvard, and on and on. So universities play a central role. Media properties, Washington Post, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, on and on. They seem to be representative of a community. Third is iconic real estate. Empire State Building, kind of the double whammy around 9/11 was not only so many people died and the terrorism, but that these buildings that defined the community were taken down. And so here in DC we have these monuments. That's why I called our company Monumental Sports and Entertainment. Fourth is public space. We have the mall. It's interesting. I think of the mall, Martin Luther King, the I Have a Dream speech was iconic to me growing up. My son, who's 21 years old, will think of it as Obama being inaugurated, and I was going down in public space, Central Park, the mall, and then you have sports teams. And you think of New York, you think of the Yankees or the Rangers or the Knicks or Giants, and Chicago, certainly the Cubs, and here we've had the Redskins, and one of my goals is to take that social responsibility very seriously and make the Capitals and the Wizards and the building, which is a convener, 3 million people come in, it's a public space, Madison Square Garden, certainly a organizing principle in Manhattan. I take that very seriously, and so I think where it starts is that I do understand that holding the psyche of the community in the palm of your hands is a really, really big responsibility.
How much of that flowed from the fact that Abe Pollin owned the Capitals and the Wizards before you did? He had an idea that a pro franchise was a public trust. How much did his approach to this business influence you?
Well, as I've said, since I acquired the remaining assets, from his estate, I hope to pay appropriate homage to the legacy that they've built, and obviously try to forge my own way. Mr. Pollin was a very brave man and had a vision that the building could turn around downtown DC. When I was an entering freshman at Georgetown, we were told in freshman orientation, do not go past 10th Street. And whatever you do, do not go to F Street. And my daughter is a freshman at Georgetown, and we went to freshman orientation, and they give a tour of Washington, D.C., and they say, whatever you do, make sure you take advantage of all Washington has to offer, the Shakespeare Theater, the Verizon Center. And so his responsibility, he built that arena at great public expense. It was an economic hardship. Frankly, I've stepped into this economic hardship, and I know how brave he was to do it. And I was with our mayor the other day, and within a mile radius now of Verizon Center, there's $300 million of tax revenues being generated for the city that wasn't there before Verizon Center opened. Mm-hmm. So it's powered the city, it's helped the city really to turn around. Mm-hmm. I'm not shy now to ask for a couple more policemen outside the building mm-hmm. to stop the scalpers and the like, but it's central to the rebirth of downtown DC. Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about engagement. I mean, you, Mark Cuban, there are a few pro sports owners out there who really engage with the fans. Talk to me about your philosophy, and also how do you manage that? There are a lot of fans. Don't you just get too many emails coming in? I mean, how do you open yourself up and be receptive, but at the same time have a personal life?
Well, first, it's endemic to my personality. I'm more extroverted than introverted, and I get my energy and my input from the community. Two, I honestly do think it's overblown because it just makes good personal sense as well as business sense. From a personal standpoint, I think it's a sad commentary on the business world in general, where this morning on the way driving here, I spoke to a customer, and we had a nice 20-minute chat, and he must have thanked me about 100 times for responding to his email and calling and speaking to him. And it was, well, that's kind of the nature of our relationship. You spend money and time with us, and you had an issue, and you send me an email, and I talk to you about it, and now that I understand it, I can deal with it. And so I do think it's pretty straightforward. Two, I think we live in this hyper, ultra, non-privacy, transparent world. And so I grew up there with AOL, and so email is at your convenience. I can time shift, and I tend to do my emails real early in the morning. I get up about 5 or 5:30, and it's great input. I also blog every day, and I use a product called TweetDeck. It takes my blog post and it turns it into a tweet. It takes my blog post and turns it into a Facebook news feed. And so I've become my own unfiltered media company. And then the traffic that gets driven to my blog, if you type in my name on Google, my blog comes up first. So I've taken control of the Google algorithm, and so I only see all of this positiveness in it, and it's the most efficient of medium. And so, I'm thankful that our fans, and we live in the most wired community. We just had a case where we're receiving accolades for this 101 things to do list, and what good leaders and managers we are. And I chuckle because most of the companies I've worked with, we'd hire McKinsey, and they would do consulting and decks. And so I said, tell me why you don't love the team and what I can do to make you fall in love. And so we got 4,000 emails and touch points, and we published the most frequently asked. And then I said, okay, I'm going to fix every one of these issues. And we're like 80 in the 101. And the satisfaction levels have been dramatic. And so I basically have just held a mirror up to the community that we serve. And I think that is a very important way for new leaders to understand that if you're not defensive and you're not afraid to look in the mirror and hear what people are telling you, not only will you have a better franchise and organization, it's also easier to manage the people who work for you, because you can honestly say, I'll make you, I get emails all the time, and I got this wonderful email from a gentleman. He said, Ted, I like beer. I drink a lot of beer. And I go to the games, and I go to this bar and meet some friends, and I have a couple of beers before we go to the game. And then I get to the arena 10 or 15 minutes before the game, and I buy 2 beers. And I go sit in my seats and I drink the beers. Now you can imagine that when the first period is ending, I really have to go to the men's room. But I also want beer for the second period. So I'll go in line, the lines are too long, and I'll get 2 beers. And then I go into the men's room, and I'm holding the 2 beers, and I really have to go to the bathroom. And I have no place to put my beers. So for me, the most important thing you could do is to add beer shelves over the urinals.
Done.
But there's 600 urinals.
Yeah.
So we did that, and I thought that was an important deliverable. Not the most strategic thing ever, but it was one of the 80 that we've done. And I can't tell you how many people are happy. Several women emailed that the stalls were loose, and that and so our vice chairman, chief operating officer, and I walked into every woman's room, and I would go in and we'd lock it and we'd write little notes. And so I do want people to understand that no detail's too small to make people happy. And if we can remove all those impediments, then it'll just come down to, can we win an NBA championship? Can we win a Stanley Cup?
Your personal approach, how has it been received by other pro sports owners? What do they say, and how do you answer them?
You know, there's not a lot of people that own teams. It's actually some would say the most exclusive of clubs, right? There's 120 teams, there's probably 80 owners, and there's maybe 60 individual owners. And we're one of the few groups personally that own a building and multiple sports teams, especially in a big market. New York is owned by Cablevision, Philadelphia is owned by Comcast. And so they look at the world a little bit differently than I do. I live here, I go to the games, I was a fan. I want to do the right thing the right way. And because I have such contact with the fan base, it intimidates a lot of other people. You know, yesterday we had a game in the afternoon, and I got there a little bit early, and I walked around the arena, and it used to be people would stop you and shake your hand, or some, I mean, it's mind-blowing, would ask for an autograph, you know, on their jersey or whatever. Now they stop, they shake your hand, they ask for an autograph, and everyone has a camera, and they all want to, and that, you really see it. I mean, the time it takes to pose and have someone shoot, and people are like, well, you're just walking around the arena, but you don't have security. And it was like, I'm with 20,000 of my friends. Why would I need security? And so I think as younger people get into ownership of teams, you'll see a pivot to it being more communal, more transparent. But some of the older, more established owners view it as being, I don't want to say radical, but I would say they don't really, they haven't internalized the benefits of it.
Right. So how do you see the, you touched on it a little bit, but I want you to expand a little bit more. What exactly, in your mind, is the role and responsibility of a pro sports owner to its community?
I've honestly been given a lot of thought to that, because there's three parts of ownership, and I've now tried to formalize it with business plans. You'll hear some folks now talk about double bottom line businesses. Businesses that leave more than they take, that do well by doing good. And so I've tried to practice that in theory, but now I'm trying to put algorithms and a science around it. I'm actually making my investments that way, and I'm getting enough real live data that says it's not a nice thing to do, that the most successful enterprises and companies, either on an informal or intrinsic or very formal basis, are living their business lives in this way. Because I think consumers want to trust the companies that they're dealing with, and then they fall in love with the companies. I know certainly when I was getting married, that was the lecture I got from my wife: if I can't trust you, I can't love you. And that was genius in the simplicity of the comments. And so I'll use my hockey team as an example. So we hold a beginning of the season meeting, and we put what are our goals for on-ice performance. We want to have the most wins. We want to score the most goals. We want to have the best goals for goals against differential. We want to make the playoffs. We want to win the Southeast Division. We want to win the Eastern Conference. We want to win the Stanley Cup. And then we judge ourselves that way. Last year we were number one in every one of those, except we lost in the playoffs. This season, already 6 weeks into the season, we're number one on every one of those. So you'd say we're doing well there. Then we have the business side, which is can we sell out every game? We had our 70th consecutive sellout. Can we create demand so we can raise ticket prices? We have 3,000 people on our waiting list to buy season tickets. Can we grow our revenues? Can we grow our TV ratings? We have some games that get a 5 rating. Larry King on CNN gets less than a 1 rating. Right? So 5 times the households locally are watching the hockey team do. And so we have our list, and we're number one in every one of those categories as well. But then we have this new list, which is how many charities are we supporting? How many philanthropists are we activating from our fan base? Because we'll help our fans if they are supporting their local charity. We have 25 millionaires that work for us. And how do we teach them to become philanthropists, our players, and how do we support them? And then what do we in ownership do? And how many organizations will we support, and how much dollars will we directly activate, and then our ripple effect of our communities, of the other owners and the players, and it's an enormous footprint. And then I have the bigger aspirational goal. And I had something personal happen. I grew up, my dad was a waiter, he's a Greek immigrant, and my mom and dad never made more than $28,000. But somehow my dad was able to afford Jets season tickets. It was $7 a ticket, and there were 7-game season. So $14 times 7. That was my birthday gift when I was a kid. And so I'd go to church on Sunday, and I'd come home, and my dad and I would take a couple of subways from Brooklyn into Manhattan, then Manhattan to Shea Stadium. And I honestly remember those days and moments vividly. And then the Jets won the Super Bowl in 1969. And it was a magnificent day. We were calling all our friends and relatives, and I played hooky from school. My dad took me to the ticker tape parade, and I really, it was vivid to me. And then my dad died 3 years ago at 92 years old. And last year, the Jets played the Colts, who have since moved to Indianapolis, in the playoffs. It was the first time they had played since '69. And it was a Saturday, I'm on the treadmill, and the NFL channel was playing the Jets against the Colts Super Bowl. And I'm watching the game, and I'm thinking of my dad, and I'm thinking of and I had to hit the pause button, and I got off the treadmill, and I teared up. I was thinking about my dad, thinking about my childhood, and I went upstairs and I told my wife, I now understand the business I'm in. I make grown men crying. I make lifelong memories between fathers and sons and mothers and daughters and friends. And this community's 5-6 million people big. Holy cow. No one's ever come up to me and said, AOL 3.0, it generated $10 billion worth of lifetime revenue. And it changed my life, and I'll never forget that. But I know if we win a Stanley Cup or an NBA championship, that for the rest of my life, I will have that bonding touch point with millions and millions of people. Mm-hmm. And that's the thrill and the deep responsibility that comes with owning a team.
A lot of these memories you're talking about were games that your favorite teams won. Now, sports is a pretty bottom line business. It's a zero-sum game. You got a winner, you got a loser. There are great rewards for winning, penalties for losing. I read your book last night about the business of the importance of being happy, and that leads to business success. When you talk to your players, when you talk to your executives about how the goal really is to be happy, is that hard for them to reconcile, given that they're in such a bottom line business that winning seems to define happiness?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, in that it sounds trite and goofy sometimes, but there's a stick-with-itness that I've now had in this belief, and I try in all of the business I'm involved with to make that central to the culture. And so if you talk it and you communicate it and you live it and you reward it and you celebrate it, and you're getting success as you bring in new people into the system, the people who are successful kind of put their arms and bring people in. We had an unbelievable thing happen last year. We were a favorite to do very well in the playoffs, and we had a 3-1 lead in the first round, and we lost. We lost in Game 7 to Montreal. It was very painful, I'll be honest. And it's painful because you feel like you let the fans down. There's some residual pain on tomorrow. I have to go face the media who are not in the business of happiness. And basically, you'll be called a loser. Yeah. Because it's so binary, and you have to deal with that, and you work so hard, and it's you win or you lose. And so after Game 7, one of our players, Brooks Lake, was driving home, and right by the Kennedy Center, a car had broken down with a flat tire. And there was a woman and 2 girls out trying to change the flat tire. And thousands of cars drove by, and Brooks stopped, and in a suit, after losing Game 7, and changed this lady's tire. And she happened to know who he was, and she called the paper, and it was a big article, and he's such a nice young man, and it's what you would want him to do. We're in this together, and you are a role model, and so now he was just nominated as one of the 4 Sports Illustrated Men of the Year for that tiny act of kindness after a loss of Game 7. Mm-hmm. So it's ironic, he did the right thing the right way, and now he's being successful. And it's a living example of, so I talk about in my book how empathy is a huge, people who show empathy usually are better leaders, and it's really good for your business. You know, I'm unabashed in saying that. I had another real-life example. I bought the team, and I was being interviewed, and I said some things I shouldn't have said about the quality of the cleanliness of the building. And I did it, and as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I said, that was bad, because I've never met with the cleaning staff. So I'm talking about something I don't understand. And so I immediately came in and said, I want to meet with the staff, and I want to understand what's involved in their job. In fact, you know what? I will clean the building. I will be undercover boss, only they'll know it. I'm going to work with them to clean the building. So we picked a game in the summer for a game against the Mystics we're playing. And so the game was on a Sunday, and my son said he'd accompany me to do it. And on Friday, we get a call from President Obama. And he says, I'd like to come to the game with my daughter. May I, and will you join me? I said, yes, Mr. President, that would be an honor, and I'd love to sit with you. So the game starts. I'm sitting with the President of the United States. I have 3 hours with the President of the United States. And we talk about everything. He said, I know you growing up, you probably wanted to be President of the United States. I want you to know when I was growing up, I wanted to own an NBA team. And they take a picture of me and the president, and it goes out on AP all over the country. In fact, the White House has framed a picture of me and the president and his daughter, and it's in the White House press room. I mean, I could never have imagined growing up that moment in time. And then everyone leaves, and I led immediately into go cleaning the women's bathroom at the Verizon Center. On my knees with a plunger. The women's bathrooms are a sight to see in a public place. And then after we cleaned the bathrooms, I worked on the picking crew, where you clean up a public space. And it is truly remarkable. Public spaces, the only place in the world where you encourage people to, whatever's left of your nachos, throw on the floor. That Coke, throw it on the floor. Your chewing gum or tobacco, spit it out. Someone else will clean it. And I cleaned the floor. I was especially happy to find the nail clipper and the nails. It's like someone came to a public arena and gave themselves a manicure. And I learned a lot. And I worked hard. It is backbreaking, hard work. And now it's 4 months later. The only thing that anyone remembers about that day is my cleaning the women's bathroom. No one has said to me anything about sitting with the most powerful man in the world. And it's just a reminder that empathy and walking the talk is much more powerful than kind of the optics of power. And so I try to teach that to the players. I try to teach that to the organization. And I'm unabashed in it now because it's working for me, right? And I hope that some people can role model to say, well, Brooks Lake is the kind of guy you'd want to pay a lot of money to. You'd want him to be a bedrock player. He's very productive, and he's a great guy. And when we bring in rookies, he mentors those kids, and we'll have generationally kind of this ethos in the teams, which is what my promise was, generationally great teams that you can be proud of, and we'll win some championships.
Gotcha. We're going to turn it over to questions here in just a minute. I'm going to ask one more, but if anybody does have any questions, I think we turn these up like this. We just ask. Okay. All right. So you own a sports team right now. You grew up in Brooklyn, moved to Lowell, Mass. at some point. Did you play sports? And
I was the only person at Georgetown who told his friends I summered in Lowell, Massachusetts.
So my question is, what was your sports experience like as a kid, and what did you get out of playing sports that made you the man that you are today?
Well, it was really interesting because, as I said, my dad was a waiter, my mom was a secretary, and because of that, they pushed me to go to school early. I'm a January birthday, and I started school early. I skipped the 8th grade, and so I went into college at an early age and graduated at an early age. And because I was always younger, school would let out at 3, and my parents would get home at 6:30. So I had 3.5 hours to hang out at school and study, and then go to this park that was across the street really from the house that we rented, or the apartment that we rented. And I just watched at an early age, walk in this park, and the courts were here, and there were these park benches. And there would be kids on the park benches drinking beer, drinking wine, smoking pot, and some going further. I had my next door neighbor best friend at 14 years old was shot and killed robbing a pharmacy because he developed a heroin addiction at 14 years old. But if you walked 100 yards this way and you played football or baseball or basketball or street hockey, you went another way in your life, and you could really go down the database of all of the kids to see the importance of sports and competition, and several of the kids that I grew up with have gone on. In fact, opening night for the Wizards, the young man who played the national anthem lived on my street. We were best friends, and his father, he was a good athlete, but his father was a musician, forced him to be a musician, and he plays in the Billy Joel band. He's played with John Lennon. He's a saxophonist, and he played the national anthem. And we were talking about this, and we used to play in the courts of Brooklyn. Now you own an NBA team, and I'm playing the national anthem for you. What a life. And so I learned that sports are vital to the development for competition, for mental and physical well-being and health. I've also seen the power of teamwork, how individuals can coalesce around a singular goal and do unbelievably big and important things. And I learned that at an early age. And so sports, youth sports, teamwork. I made a movie called Kicking It that ESPN bought, and it was about the Homeless World Cup, a charity that I'm involved with. It takes homeless people who are all about me. Where do I sleep? Where do I eat? How do I get money? And puts them in a team environment, and they compete. And afterwards, 73% of them go back to school, go back to living at home, they get jobs. I mean, and the tagline was, "A ball can change your life." And I really do believe that. And I think that sometimes what happens in sports is that it's easy to write about steroids and children out of wedlock, and bloggers can be snarky and dog fighting and the like, but when the Homeless World Cup's in town, or Brooks Lake changes someone's tire, or Alex Ovechkin last week hosts kids from Make-A-Wish Foundation, it doesn't make good copy.
Yeah.
And so we just need ways to exercise that arm as much as we do the other arm, and ESPN can play a big role in that.
Well, let me ask you this: there are, what role do sports leagues and sports teams play in making sure that kids get the same access to physical exercise that you did as a kid? Parks that are viable, physical education that's available. youth sports teams that don't cost $2,000 a year. Is there any
Well,
role?
there's a ton of work to do, but there probably should be kind of a Manhattan Project organized that finds the facts and makes them self-evident that a big part of young adults' development can be enhanced, their success in life through education and sports and fitness is the right thing for us as a country and businesses to do, but it also makes so much sense economically. I think sometimes we don't do that. I'm involved in a charity that helps young adults who, they're 16 years old and they commit a serious crime. And they drop out of school, they're in the juvenile system, sometimes they even go to jail, and then they get out and they're 2 or 3 years now behind their peers, and it's really hard for them to get back into the educational track. And so this charity, the Maya Angelou School, charter school, we work it real hard, but there's a business side of it. When a young adult gets incarcerated, it costs $400,000 a year to keep that kid in prison. $400,000 a year. And with no contribution. And then you go, well, if we get them into these school systems and we get them into college and they get jobs and it costs us $30,000 a year for 4 or 5 years, what a great ROI. Plus then they contribute positively, which we don't measure closely enough. So I do think that there's lots of anecdotal stuff, and we build playgrounds, we help ice rinks, we're doing the Winter Classic, we're using Fort DuPont as the charity that will support. But I'd like to see there be a more organized, fact-based, self-evident. When you're just shown the numbers, you go, of course I'll support that because I'm a venture capitalist even with my charitable work. I want to see 10x return. And so whatever the Aspen Institute can do to connect those dots and make it fact-based. The leagues are big businesses. The NFL's $8 billion, the NBA's $4 billion, NHL's $3 billion, I think baseball's $5 billion. There's enough assets there that we could do something good, but it probably does need more of an organizing principle.
Connecting of silos, basically.
Yeah.
Right, I got you. Okay, so I don't want to hog. He's a great guy to talk to, and I could talk to him all day, but let's throw it out to the crowd here. Yep.
Pablo Schneider with Latino Leaders Magazine, and in 2011, the Washington, D.C. designated market area is going to reach about 6.5 million people, 3.5 million non-Hispanic white, 1.5 million African American, over 800,000 Hispanic, and over 500,000 Asians. What are your thoughts on professional sports teams as platforms for promoting diversity and inclusion?
Well, I'm very proud to say my vice chairman, best friend, one of my partners is Raul Fernandez. We should highlight Raul in some ways. Fantastic entrepreneur. He's one of the founders of Venture Philanthropy Partners that I'm involved with. And Sheila Johnson's one of my other partners, and she is really the first African-American woman to own a piece of 3 professional sports teams. Dr. Jung Kim happens to be Korean. He's president of Bell Labs, unbelievably great entrepreneur. He's one of our owners. Michelle Freeman. We have the most diverse ownership group in sports. And I did that, I'm proud to say it, they're all my best friends, and I invited them in, and they happen to be diverse. And so, once again, it's turned out to be great business. We had Asian Heritage Night because one of our players happens to be Chinese. We traded for him, and they broadcasted our game to 400 million people in China, if you can believe that, last Tuesday. And we sold 3,000 tickets locally in Chinatown, which is attached basically to the arena. No one had really ever embraced it in that way. And so it's like, isn't this great? It feels really good. It's the right thing to do. 400 million people will see our game. We sold a bunch of tickets. Our player was really happy. We did the right thing the right way. And so I can look everyone in the eye and say, I believe it, but I don't bring people in to consult with us and tell us how to be more diverse. We are diverse. That's the communities we serve are diverse. So I feel intrinsically, naturally connected to it.
Hi, well, my name's Wayne Curtis. I'm, like I say, graduate student. I want to thank the Aspen Institute for helping me in my social entrepreneurship research. I, too, had the pleasure during college for work study cleaning the ladies' bathroom, so we have a connection. I'm curious. I've run into a lot of well-to-do young professionals who are always seem at a loss of how to really plug in their money and get directed toward double bottom line ventures. So have you and the Aspen Institute thought about more like philanthropic boot camp type sessions where you can really bring and educate and really help them with the practical and the philosophical pieces that you've talked about today?
Well, the Aspen Institute can address what they do. There's so many portals out there that marry up people. I founded eBuddies, which allows people to connect with people who have intellectual disabilities. We have 10,000 couples now. I'm very hands-on as a mentor and get deeply involved with the causes that I support. I started a company called Snag Films, where filmmakers are telling stories mostly to right a wrong and to activate charitable giving. And so Snag's a living example of a double bottom line business. You go and you watch a movie, and if you like it, you snag it, and you embed it into your website or your blog, your Facebook page, and you stream it to your friends. We work with the filmmaker and we connect a charity with the message of the film. We now support more than 500 charities, and you'll see the film widget, you'll see how much money we raise. And in 2.5 years, we now have 2,000 films, 110,000 virtual movie theaters open as people say, oh, this is an important film about a cause that's important to me. I want to share it with people. We'll stream 20, 30 million movies this month. It's being called the Netflix of documentary film. And it's going to make a lot of money for me one day. But I'm helping filmmakers, I'm helping charities, I'm helping people to self-express, and we work with Global Giving, and Global Giving is one of those aggregators. And so go to snagfilms.com, you'll see all the charities. Please don't type in stagfilms.com, which someone did. I got this email. How dare you? I thought you were a good man. You've started a porn business. Snagfilms.com.
Snag Films. Yeah, Mark.
Ted, I'm Mark Hyman. I'm a journalist.
I won't hold that against you.
Take the microphone.
Thank you.
We're filming all this, by the way, and you can mention this. It'll be on our website, so for your friends who couldn't be here today and want to hear these remarkably passionate and inspiring comments from Ted, please urge them to come to our website.
My first question is prompted by a conversation that I sometimes have with my wife. When you go to bed at night, do you turn off your BlackBerry?
I'm going to be very sincere with you. I think I never go out with my mobile device. I never go to meetings with my mobile device. I never do anything social with my mobile device. I actually have a close friend, Seth Hurwitz, owns the 930 Club, who lives on it. And I told him I thought he was rude, that you invite me to lunch, and when you're talking to me, we're friends, you're engaged, and when I'm talking to you, your head is down. And so does that mean that the people in the ether are more important to you than me? Because you invited me to lunch and you came and make eye contact. And so I'm as connected as anybody, but I believe in the power of intimacy. And I've even gotten in my meetings at my companies, I tell people, don't come to the meetings and not be engaged because you're under the table. And I also think there's a safety issue. I was in New York 2 weeks ago and had rented a car, and we were right by Radio City Music Hall, and the light was changing. My driver kind of went and stopped, and he was rolling to the stop, and this businessman was walking with his head down and went right into the car. And like went up in the air and fell down. And at first we were scared. And he obviously got up and he started cursing at the driver. And my driver was all upset. And I got out of the car and I said, no, this is unacceptable. You're a moron. You walked right into the car because you were texting. You deserve whatever you got. You know, you're going to be embarrassed? Well, take this as a lesson. You're crossing a street in Manhattan with your texting? And so I'm concerned about it. I mean, I think it's just bad etiquette, and I think it's bad for business, because people leave meetings and you ask them, well, what was that meeting about? They don't know. They're like updating their Facebook news feed or something. So no, I'm not even near, I don't bring it into the bedroom at all.
If I could just ask quickly a second
And
question.
I have a very good marriage, by the way.
Yeah, well, I'm debating whether I should report back to my wife now. I'm teaching sport management at GW in the spring, and I've been watching what you've been dealing with over the last couple of months, Gilbert Arenas, and what to name your franchise. And I wonder, who do you go to for advice on these unusual management issues, and what do you expect from them?
Well, with Gilbert Arenas, I used my own compass there. The first was as a person, great player who's missed 3 years of his life. And if you know Gilbert or you research Gilbert, he loves the game of basketball. And it was taken away from him through injury and through what happened last year. And so I invited him to my house when I bought the team. I just wanted to talk to him as a person. And it was a very honest, one-on-one conversation between two people. And, I got to learn a lot about him and vice versa. And I made my decision. We're in it together. He made a mistake. I think it's been underreported the price he paid for that mistake. He didn't get paid for a year. $17 million fine, basically, for that. He lost his sponsorship contracts. He spent 30 days in a halfway house. He paid his price. And I've certainly in my life and career done some things that I regret. this is a city that is the king of second chances. And when I first moved here, our mayor was arrested. And then he was mayor again. And so I'm a healer, and I think I have good instincts on people. So on that one, I've got Gilbert's back. Now again, from a business standpoint, he's my highest paid player. And he's one of the best players in the league when he's healthy. And if he plays well, the team will do better. If the team does better, I'll sell more tickets. So it probably pays to do the right thing. And I'll be criticized for it, but I'm unabashed again in being honest. In regards to the team name, that's a tough one. I was elected mayor of my town in Florida, and I went to a mayor's conference once. And Pat Cadell, he's a pollster, is that what you would call him? He gave this great speech in one of the breakouts about the silent majority, the 80% of the people who just live their lives and consume their daily services and for the most part, don't want to be awoken from what they do. And how there's 10% of the population on each side of an issue that are incredibly articulate, passionate, and if you listen to them, the majority of the people, if you just listened in isolation, you'd go, well, you know, that makes a lot of sense, and you're absolutely right. And then you'll listen to the other side, and it's equally as passionate and articulate, and it's really hard. And that's what like our city's about here, right? That the majority of people like are trying to find work and pay their rent and mortgage, and then there's 10% of people that are really loud, and that's what's happened like with the bullets, right? I mean, there's 10% of the people that are desperate for us to change the name for their own reasons. And then there's 10% that say, but Mr. Poland changed the name of the Wizards for all the right reasons. And they're equally as articulate. And rather than wade into the 10% on each side, I'm trying to focus on the 80%. And I can't even do anything about a name change if I wanted to for like 2.5 years, and it costs millions and millions of dollars. So I told everyone the truth. I'm punting on a decision. I'd rather put the beer holders in the urinals and paint the stairs and change the lights, because I can deal with that and the majority will get benefit from it. But most people, it's not that important of an issue. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Okay. A Game 7, post-Game 7 question. After Game 7, there was all sorts of, we're talking Capitals, not Wizards. After Game 7, there was all sorts of commentary about how the Caps had to reinvent themselves, whatever that meant. And I think it's fair to say that based on this much of the season, that it's still the same kind of high-octane team that you had last year, which is a relief to me. But I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the decision, what the discussion was like after Game 7 when you took into account the fact that, I mean, you really lost that series on the basis of about 2 or 3 missed shots. It would have been a different story if they hadn't had a hot goalie. But how did you work through, or at the management level, how did you work through that decision?
Well, that's very astute observation. And the media, plays a big role in all of this. So this off season, you never make a decision after a win or a loss. The emotions are too raw and you don't think clearly. And so we spent some time to decompress, and then we looked at that matrix of how did we do and how old were our players. And it's ironic, what people haven't noticed this year was we actually have gotten younger this year than we were last year. Our goaltenders, our defensemen, our AHL Hershey affiliate has won their championship the last 2 years, and we felt it's probably smarter and more culturally astute to reward young players that have done a great job and stay with our strategy than have a knee-jerk reaction to what some of that 10% on one side of an issue, and frankly some of the media who can write whatever they want without accountability. When we announced our rebuild, Tom Boswell wrote a column, not that I would remember it, and said, if you're a cap season ticket holder, you should take your tickets, drive to Ted's home in McLean, Virginia, light them on fire, and throw them on his front lawn. That's what he wrote. And you know, now we are the model. We are a model franchise in the league. Our team will be good for another dozen years. This offseason, we were criticized for not signing several named free agents. And those free agents were signed elsewhere. It's still early in the season. One of those teams is under 500, and another one of those teams is next to last place in the NHL, and we're in first place in the NHL. And so what I've learned, there's a comment, I don't know who made it, about no one knows nothing. And that's what I believe, that no one knows nothing, and that to thine own self be true. I have a strategy, I have a vision, we've articulated it, everyone is bought in. If I had overreacted, I think it would have hit the central belief system of the organization, because it would have been, oh, you're changing, you can adapt. We have a better penalty kill this year than we did last year. Our goaltending is better, our goals against are better. So we are tweaking and improving, but I didn't think that we needed to listen to people that say you're a loser. And ESPN once ran a poll, the biggest winners and losers of the decades. When were the Buffalo Bills really good?
When I was a kid.
But 80s or 90s? 90s?
Yeah, 90s, Jim Kelly.
So the Buffalo Bills won their division 6 or 7 years in the decade, won the NFC championship 4 times, and went to the Super Bowl 4 times. Sold out every game and really held the psyche of their city together, and the value of the franchise quadrupled in value. And ESPN did a poll, biggest winners and biggest losers of the decades, and the Buffalo Bills were the biggest losers of the decade because they had lost 4 Super Bowls. And I remember looking at that saying, what other business would you be considered a loser for doing all of that for the decade? They were like the best franchise over this long period. And like Meyer Lansky said in The Godfather, this is the business that we have chosen.
Second place is the worst place to be in sports, basically. Yeah, that's true.
Hi, I'm Shane Green. I love hearing you talk about how hands-on you are with the players and the fans. I'm really curious, because you don't hear much about this, and there are certainly other models out there of your philosophy on how you relate to your coaches, how you pick them, how you interact with them during the season. You always hear, no, I let the coach make the decision on whether this person plays or not. How much are you willing to share with us about that, and do you even have a philosophy, given how early on you are at this?
I didn't play pro hockey or pro basketball. It would be presumptuous and disrespectful for me to ever do anything with a coach. If you're going to launch a new website, you probably want to come talk to me in the company. But I will tell you a funny story. Our coach for the Caps right now was a career minor league coach. And he won a championship in Hershey, and when we unfortunately had to fire our coach, who I was on vacation, and our general manager and president called me at 11 o'clock on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That's usually not a good time. And they said, we've made a decision, we have to fire our coach. I said, nice, happy Thanksgiving, just what I believe in. And they said, no, it was a relief to him because he couldn't make the team work. And we're going to promote our minor league coach on an interim basis. And we'll interview other people, but we'll see how he does. And he has the best record in hockey since he's been named coach in 3.5 years. And when we took off his first home game, I knew him a little bit, just shaking his hand, and I saw him walking in the hallway. They said, welcome, you're going to have a great time, we really need help. And I said, are you wired up for the game? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, hasn't George briefed you? And he said, I'm sorry, what do you mean? I said, well, I sit in the owner's box for home games, and I have a really good view, so I call in the line changes during the game. And there was just like a second of, holy cow, come on. So, no, I give them no input. My job is vision, strategy, culture, investment, keeping them upbeat, being in the locker room, win or lose, same demeanor. Same with the general manager, although I've told George if he wants to trade Alex Ovechkin, he probably needs to run it by me. But other than that, they're the pros. And if you don't believe in them, then you have a different issue, right? I mean, if you think you can run the team, in business, I've seen unbelievable failures in business. I remember the worst hire we ever made. We hired a COO at AOL who was a fantastic executive, and he was the COO of Federal Express. Planes, logistics, he knew it all. He was unbelievable. We invented a medium. I had never run a public company, but I built AOL. Steve Case built AOL, and we were told, bring in, I'll never forget this term, adult supervision. And we brought in someone who didn't know anything about the industry. And 9 months later, we had to terminate him. It's like, what were we thinking? Of course it was destined to fail. Well, can you imagine me picking players? We have scouts in Russia and Sweden and all over Canada. They go to 250 to 300 games a year. They live on the road, and the draft comes, and they articulate and they argue about who we should draft, and then you have all the stats and all these analytics. And you think I would say, no, I don't want to take Alex Ovechkin. I want to take Cam Barker, who was a high draft pick that year. It's lunacy, and so it's bad business as well.
We have time for one more short question. Beth, did you have one?
Well, just to follow on your comment, I'm just curious as to take basketball. So what if you end up hands off? You end up with 5 great players, 5 really bad guys. What do you do?
Well, it's tough because are there bad people or bad cultures? and can people be forgiven? There's a criminal element in life, but I think for the most part, people want to do good. I'll give you, again, in the media, doesn't help. So we have a player on the Wizards named Josh Howard. And Josh came to us via trade from Dallas last year. And several years ago, he had an incident with marijuana. And so I've gotten to know him, and he's injured, and he has set up a foundation, and he's actively given back to his university, and he's unbelievably doing work in our city, hands-on work, single mothers, some things he's doing around Christmas, some things he's doing around education, where it's genuine, authentic, with great leadership. And he makes a website to talk about what he's doing, and I meet with him and I'm helping him, and it's spectacular. And I do a blog post saying, Josh Howard, leader, and look at the things that he's doing to activate the double bottom line. And this is every one of my conversations and meeting with him has been about rehabilitating himself so he can be a great player again and help us on the court and what he's doing in the community. And I do the blog post, and all the snark comes out about his smoking marijuana a couple of years ago. And it's hard, right, in that he is being a role model. He is being someone who's unbelievably responsible in everything that I see, but it's lazy and cheap and easy to be snarky. And it's a shame, to be honest. And so I make my judgments on people and players by getting to know them and seeing the body of work. And so there's a case where if you ask outside, someone says, oh, I got all these bad guys. You go like, who? Well, Josh Howard. Josh Howard's spectacular human being. Everything we've ever done in the charitable, he's first to volunteer, right? And so I think what's happened, the NBA, wonderful people, unbelievable athletes, they look different than a lot of the people in the media.
I want to thank Ted for showing up today and sharing his many thoughts.
Thank you. Hey, and it would be okay if you guys bought a couple of tickets here or there.
And in addition to that, it would be okay if you bought a couple of books.